Hi, it's Jen again, and this week I decided I was going to do something a little bit different. I have a few speed paints of some of the art assets that I made for my game already uploaded to my channel, but I thought I would just do kind of a talk over this time, and I wouldn't speed it up so much this time around either, so you would be able to see my process a little bit more as I'm drawing. I'm not really going to talk about my art process though in this video. I'm actually planning on kind of more talking about just how I've been feeling and how I've been working on my project lately, like where I am in development at this moment. So this is some character art that I made for the companion routes in the story. So the companion routes are kind of optional dialogue. You really are kind of forced to watch through some of the companion route, like if you wanted to go through and just like not have any relationship with the companion characters at all, like you can, but there's a certain amount that you will probably be forced to watch just by going through the game. It would be probably hard to avoid building up some relationship with them. But this point where you're given kind of the choice whether or not to be in a friendship relationship or within a romantic relationship, then it becomes all optional after that. You can reject them if you want. But yeah, I've started working on chapter 4. I was at a standstill for a while because I think that the final chapter in any project is difficult. You've built up a lot of things up until that final chapter. For me, the big climax, I feel like, was more in chapter 3, and then chapter 4 has a lot of revelations, but there's a lot that I have to explain in chapter 4. And I don't want it to be like just some kind of like information dump. Like, I feel like there's a couple different like pitfalls that we have to avoid as from a writing standpoint as we're concluding the story. And this part is always a little scary for me, is that I want to be able to explain things adequately enough to the reader that it feels like there's been clues that I've been leading up to, that if they've been observant and thoughtful, there should be like a sense of revelation, like, oh, you know, this is a really satisfactory explanation for some of these questions that were brought up and that I was wondering about. But at the same time, like, I don't want to explain things away where things start to feel like really contrived or convoluted, or that the story becomes more about like these very abstract ideas rather than kind of the more very basic, you know, character development. You know, that's what I always want, like the focus of my stories to be, are just the gradual development of the characters themselves. And there's not really going to be a moment in the story where they suddenly do like a 180 and it's like, oh my gosh, now they're completely different. Like, I know that there are some stories where you might have like this giant like plot twist that's like, oh, I didn't see that coming, that's out of left field, like, oh, I'm so shocked, that was so surprising. And I'm not a huge fan of those myself. I think it's kind of hard these days to make a really compelling plot twist that feels clever and feels like satisfying, just because so much of it has already been done before. And you know, I don't like to throw all my writing cards out on the table at once, because one, that would that would, again, just be like this big convoluted info dump that would just not be very entertaining to read through. It would be kind of a slog. But then, like, two, I don't want to, you know, make things so subtle that, like, any of the events that occur or the conclusions that are drawn would be, like, so surprising that I just, like, lose somebody there. Or that it seems, like, so unlikely, or it just seems so, you know, like, oh my gosh, all the stars in the universe, like, aligned this certain way to, like, make this, like, crazy outcome. Yeah, like, that's not really my personal goals with this story. You know, I'd like to think that it's not going to be completely predictable or overdone to death. You know, some of the story and the conclusion that I'm going to reach in chapter 4, but at the same time, I'm more focused on making people invested in my characters. So, like, the plot itself is just kind of more secondary. It's just something to kind of, like, drive the characters into their growth and development, and then the results are just kind of, you know, are secondary. And I guess that's maybe why I've always wanted to make a visual novel, is because the actual outcome is somewhat, like, secondary to the character development themselves. I'm not really, like, tied into, like, the idea of, like, one true outcome, or, like, one route that is, like, the true route. I think that, you know, there's kind of all different ways that the characters can develop, you know. And so I'm looking forward to having the epilogue where there are, like, several different final outcomes. But chapter 4, getting back to chapter 4, is a bit daunting because I have a certain amount of things that I have to explain, and then I want to do this in a way that is still interesting, and I was really struggling with a way of presenting the information that I feel like I'm obligated to reveal in a way that still had, like, I incorporated game mechanic to it. And so I spent a long time on chapter 3, mainly because it was a long chapter, and I've been going back and adding these kind of, like, little artistic flourishes, and trying to refine some aspects of chapter, like, 2 and 3. But chapter 3 was actually very well, I think I organized it pretty well, and I had a pretty good idea of what I was doing at that time. So I don't really feel like I have a lot that I have to go back and rework in chapter 3. I could change my mind after I get some more testing done on it. But I really was putting off making a long story, trying to make a long story a little bit shorter. I was really putting off working on chapter 4 because I didn't know how I wanted to present the information that I felt obligated to reveal. Like, at this point, I need to draw the events to a conclusion. I have to start preparing my epilogue, and I was just getting stuck with how I was going to wrap up this final chapter. And I'm happy to say that after starting to outline the epilogue and honestly reworking my goals with the endings to be more character and relationship focused, I started to get a better idea of what was absolutely crucial to happen in chapter 4, and then I was able to start working backwards. So I outlined my endings for the 2 companion choices that are currently available, Mikhail the Thief and Keska the Bard. And after thinking about the endings, I was able to go back and really focus on what information I needed to reveal and what was the big decision that the protagonist needed to make, and how I could how I could incorporate gameplay to revealing the information that would give the player the information they needed in order to make those final decisions for the protagonist. So one of the game mechanics, or I guess the main game mechanic in this game, is building up the 3 different attributes of power, logic, and empathy. And these are not stats in the sense of like ability boosting stats, but more like what is your general tactic in resolving issues. So it's not a measure of the morality of your choices. It's more just like what is your tool that you lean on heaviest when you're looking at a situation, when you're solving a problem. Like, are you the type of person who wants to control the situation? Then that would be more of a power, an inclination towards power. Are you more the type of person that wants to analyze the situation in the most pragmatic and emotionless way you can, like in the most unbiased way that you can? And that would be more of a logical approach. Are you more the type of person to rely on your gut feelings? Then that would be more of the empathy approach. So that's kind of, I wanted how you've been building up the character attributes up until this point to play a major impact on the type of ending and the type of conclusions that are available to you. So there will be a point where there will be some things that will be out of the player's control at that point, because everything they've been building has like led up to that, and you're kind of like locked in at that point. But then there will be a few choices that will modify those, that final, so you will have somewhat of a final word that will modify kind of your locked in route at that point. And so I had all of these ideas going in about how I wanted the story to conclude and how I wanted the player's stat attribution to affect the story up until this point. And we haven't even talked about like the relationship aspect of it yet either, which I decided that I wanted to play a more crucial role. So yeah, I think I got too hung up in like what I wanted the game to achieve on a mechanics side of it, that I lost sight of like the story side of it. And so forcing myself to outline the endings and then go back and think of it more from a storytell point actually helped me like help me lock in on like a mechanic, because each level kind of has its own like map integration that has something to do with like what we're exploring on that level. So I was finally able to come up with a unique map system for chapter 4 that I'm happy with, and so I have a clear direction on how I'm going to finally wrap up this game, and I'm really excited about that. So yeah, that's just where I am with development, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video. There's a few quirks I've still got to work out with this animation and this sprite and the implementation, but this gives you kind of like a rough idea of where I'm going with some of it. And I think next week I will have some of Mikhail's art to show off. So yeah, this is Jen, I guess, signing off. And as always, don't forget to enjoy the process. Thanks for watching and have a great week.